Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story: following hot on the heels of President Trump's visit, Russian President Vladimir Putin is in Beijing with new China-Russia agreements and reactions from U.S. allies in the Indo-Pacific. President Trump says he will speak with Taiwan's president. If it happens, it would mark the first direct contact between a sitting U.S. president and a Taiwanese president in decades.
Well, I'll speak to him. I speak to everybody.
The Justice Department is charging multiple Chinese executives and shipping companies over alleged pandemic-era price fixing. Prosecutors say the scheme generated billions of dollars while American store shelves sat empty. China-linked scam centers are stealing billions of dollars from Americans every year. They operate across Southeast Asia and are now drawing attention from the U.S. Congress. And two Chinese tankers are exiting the Strait of Hormuz after weeks of delays as U.S.-Iran talks show progress and regional tensions remain high. Before we dive into today's news, here's a message from our sponsor. If you watch China in Focus, you know the story doesn't end at China's borders. What happens inside China often ripples across the entire world. Supply chains, markets, even the stability of global economies can't shift based on decisions made. Tensions between China and the United States continue to shape global trade, energy, and financial markets. And China has been buying gold at record rates. If you live in the U.S., then you can also diversify your wealth with something tangible. Physical gold and silver from American Hartford Gold. These are tangible assets not tied to any single government or political system. Gold has held its value through inflation, currency shifts, and periods of global instability. American Hartford Gold has an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau and thousands of 5-star reviews. They can deliver gold and silver directly to your door or help you set up a gold IRA if you're thinking long-term and want to diversify your retirement. And right now, when you call and mention China in Focus, you could get up to $20,000 in free silver with your first qualifying purchase. Call 855-403-1118 or text China to 65532. That's 855-403-1118 or text China to 65532 or click the link in the description down below. Russian President Vladimir Putin visits China shortly after President Trump, marking a rare back-to-back sequence of high-profile engagements in Beijing. The moves come as the U.S. and China continue navigating an increasingly complex rivalry, and a geopolitical chain reaction is unfolding across Asia. Here are the details.
Russian President Vladimir Putin visiting China from May 19th to 20th and met with Chinese leader Xi Jinping on Wednesday. The visit came just 4 days after President Trump concluded his trip. Like Trump's delegation of top cabinet officials and major business leaders, Putin arrived with a large senior-level economic and political team, including 5 deputy prime ministers and 8 cabinet ministers. In Beijing, Putin was granted a similar high-level reception to President Trump, featuring a welcoming ceremony at Tiananmen Square, a state banquet, and an intimate tea meeting following formal talks. Opening the summit, Putin used the Chinese idiom, "A single day apart feels like 3 years," expressing strong anticipation and close friendship. He declared that Russia-China relations are at an unprecedented height, calling the partnership a global model. Xi Jinping reaffirmed that their ties will continue with high-quality development. The two nations announced the extension of their 2001 Good Neighborly Treaty of Friendship and Cooperation. They also issued a joint statement to strengthen strategic cooperation and outlined dozens of new agreements. Meanwhile, Western nations are closely watching whether Beijing will provide lethal military or dual-use technology support for Russia's war in Ukraine.
President Trump said that he will speak with Taiwan's president. That would be significant, as U.S. and Taiwanese presidents have not spoken directly since the U.S. shifted diplomatic recognition from Taiwan to China half a century ago. Take a listen.
Do you have any plans to call President Lai of Taiwan before you make a decision on the weapons package?
Well, I'll speak to him. I speak to everybody. We have that situation very well in hand. We had a great meeting with President Xi. It was amazing, actually. It was amazing. Many of you were there. We'll work on that, the Taiwan problem.
What do you make of President Xi meeting with Putin this week?
Well, he told me he was going to. I think it's good. I get along with both of them, but I think it's good. I don't know if the ceremony is quite as brilliant as mine. I watched. I think we topped them.
President Trump did speak by phone with then Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen in 2016, but at the time he was president-elect, not yet in office. Taiwan's president says the island will continue strengthening its defenses and deepen ties with the U.S. Lai Ching-te made the remarks on Wednesday as tensions continue to rise between China and the island.
Taiwan is aware of the growing threat from China, which is why we have increased our defense budget. We believe that only strength can bring peace. In other words, enhancing our defense capabilities and purchasing military equipment from the United States are necessary. It means not only to safeguard Taiwan's security, but also to maintain peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. We hope that this arms purchase program can continue.
Lai saying if he could talk to President Trump, he would emphasize that peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait was crucial for global security. Lai calling China a destroyer of peace and stability in the Strait. China has increased military pressure on Taiwan and recently carried out another combat readiness patrol near the island. The U.S. is bound by law to provide Taiwan with weapons. In December, the Trump administration approved an $11 billion arms package, the largest ever. A second package worth some $14 billion has yet to be formally approved.
The Justice Department announcing indictments against multiple Chinese executives and shipping container companies for price fixing during the COVID-19 pandemic. The department adding that the companies made billions of dollars while many store shelves in the U.S. were empty. NTD's Jason Perry has the latest update.
Officials from the Department of Justice on Tuesday announcing charges against 7 Chinese executives and 4 Chinese shipping container companies, accusing them of violating antitrust laws by fixing the prices of shipping containers, more than doubling their costs during the COVID-19 pandemic, which affected about $35 billion worth of global commerce. Acting Assistant Attorney General Omid Asefi of the DOJ Antitrust Division saying that collectively those Chinese companies make up about 95% of the world's standard dry shipping containers.
So in November of 2019, on the brink of the COVID-19 pandemic, the 6 manufacturers entered into a conspiracy to restrict how many standard containers they would all make. This allowed the companies to create an artificial shortage, which enabled them to raise container prices and make more money at your expense.
Adding that they, quote, choked the supply of the containers precisely at the time the world was depending on it most. Asefi also noting that it was not that long ago when store shelves were empty and many Americans could not get the things they needed, while at the same time the profits of one of the defendants in the indictment jumped nearly 100-fold from about $20 million in 2019 to about $1.75 billion in 2021. But before the indictment was unsealed, one of the defendants was in France.
The defendant Vic Ma, a globe-trotting Chinese executive, attempted to fly from Charles de Gaulle Airport to Hong Kong, where he was intercepted by a group of law enforcement officials as part of Operation Midnight in Paris. Thanks to the exceptional skill and dedication of the French National Police and many other law enforcement partners, the defendant never boarded that flight.
Vic Ma is currently pending extradition to the United States to be tried for violating antitrust laws. The Justice Department saying the case demonstrates its commitment to protecting American consumers and businesses from global supply chain manipulation. Jason Perry, NTD News.
China-linked scam centers are stealing billions of dollars from Americans every year, according to a new congressional investigation. The centers operate across Southeast Asia and are also tied to human trafficking and cybercrime. Congressional leaders say the operations are becoming more sophisticated and harder to stop. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has more.
A Chinese government-owned company directly contracted with a criminal organization to construct massive scam center compounds in Southeast Asia.
The House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party releasing a new investigation exposing a network of scam compounds operating across Southeast Asia, all linked to China. Lawmakers say the networks concentrated in Cambodia, Burma, and Laos are stealing billions from Americans through online fraud schemes.
Most of these are mysterious messages and phone calls. A text pops up on our phone that says, "How are you doing?" from an unknown number. All too often, the person on the other end of the text is a human trafficking victim locked in a scam compound with instructions to steal as much money from victims as possible.
The committee says that the operations are fueled by Chinese banking networks, cryptocurrency brokers, and shell companies. Now, Chinese state-owned companies are even contracted to build many of these scam centers.
These actors maintain deep ties into China and ultimately colluded with Chinese state-owned enterprises tied to the Belt and Road Initiative, with whom they constructed infrastructure that is now used for industrial-scale scam operations.
Lawmakers say that trafficked workers are often lured with fake job offers, being forced to carry out scams under the threat of violence.
The American grandfather whose retirement is stolen and the trafficked worker beaten inside a scam compound are victims of the same criminal enterprise.
And lawmakers say that these scams have become increasingly sophisticated, using AI, stolen personal data, and fake online identities to target victims across the U.S. Common tactics include fake toll road payment texts and online investment schemes.
90% of his retirement had been stolen. He called local police. They said they did not have the resources to help.
The FBI is reporting nearly $21 billion in scam-related losses last year, which is a sharp increase from the previous year.
Which is likely itself significantly underreported given the stigmas associated with this crime. This is potentially the largest form of financial crime impacting Americans today.
The Trump administration set up the Scam Center Strike Force, which last month seized $700 million from 2 Chinese nationals charged with operating a cryptocurrency investment scam compound in Burma. Committee leaders are now pushing bipartisan legislation called the Dismantle Foreign Scam Syndicates Act. That would create a government-wide task force from all levels of law enforcement against foreign scam networks. For NTD News Washington, I'm Jack Bradley.
2 Chinese oil tankers have now left the Strait of Hormuz after sitting in the Gulf for more than 2 months. It comes as tensions surrounding Iran remain high and negotiations between Washington and Tehran continue. Shipping data shows the 2 supertankers were carrying roughly 4 million barrels of crude oil. The Chinese vessels loaded cargoes from Iraq and Qatar earlier this year, just before fighting between Iran and Israel escalated. They remained in the Gulf for weeks amid uncertainty over regional security. There were also concerns about possible disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most important oil shipping routes. Their departure now comes as the White House signals progress in talks with Iran. Vice President J.D. Vance says negotiations are in a pretty good spot, adding that both sides continue to make progress. President Trump has continued to pressure Tehran to reach a deal, while also threatening military action if negotiations fail. 2 wars continue in Europe and the Middle East, and there is the potential for another war over Taiwan. Against that backdrop, the head of the world's largest military alliance, NATO, discussed on Wednesday why it needs to maintain strong relations outside its territory, including in the Asia-Pacific region.
Let's not be naive. What's happening here? What's happening here is that since basically 2022, we see China and Russia and North Korea and Iran working closely together. It's one of the reasons why in NATO, on the US side, the Canadian side, the European side of NATO, we are conscious of the fact, yes, NATO is a transatlantic alliance. But given the fact that Russia is working together with China, North Korea and Iran, we have to make sure that we have strong relations with partners outside NATO territory. This is one of the reasons why my chief of staff was recently in Japan, why I was myself visiting Japan a year ago, why we have intensive conversations with the Republic of Korea, with Australia, with New Zealand.
Rutte says the gradual reduction of U.S. troops in Europe will happen in a structured way that won't impact NATO's defense plans. Rutte also said discussions about how much the U.S. would contribute to NATO in the event of a crisis had started over a year ago. He described it as a logical response to the increased defense spending by European allies and Canada.
The United States is NATO's largest military power, accounting for roughly 2/3 of the alliance's total defense spending. Coming up, the race for AI dominance is on, but are the U.S. and China interdependent? Cybersecurity advisor Rex Lee joins us to explain.
In China, there's an estimate of over 600 million Chinese who've adopted AI through AI adoption. Where in the United States, we see the opposite.
More on that after the break here on China in Focus. Welcome back to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. German authorities arrested a couple on Wednesday accused of spying for Beijing and gathering military technology from German researchers. Federal prosecutors say the couple made contact with academics at universities and research institutes across Germany, including experts in aerospace, computer science, and artificial intelligence. The pair is also suspected of posing as interpreters or employees of an auto company to access advanced technologies. Authorities allege some scientists were invited to China for paid lectures that were attended by Chinese state-linked defense firms. Germany has been stepping up efforts to de-risk economic ties with China amid growing concerns over technology transfer and espionage risks. The race for AI dominance, that was a big takeaway from the Trump-Xi meeting. But behind the headlines, how dependent are U.S. AI data centers on the China supply chain? Joining us now is Rex Lee, cybersecurity advisor at MySmartPrivacy, to unpack the stats. Rex Lee, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you back on the show.
Tiffany, thank you for having me on the show.
Now, fresh off of his visit to China, President Trump and China Xi spoke a lot about AI or national security. There's been a lot of focus on that, especially the tech race. There's also in the headlines lately a lot of focus on global AI data centers. I know you've done a lot of research into this. What did you find in terms of the supply chains and if there is that race between the U.S. and China?
So what's interesting about this trip to China is if you go back and you look at the executives, there were a lot of tech executives like Jensen Huang of NVIDIA, Tim Cook of Apple, the CEO for Cisco also attended this trip. You see a lot of these tech innovators and manufacturers that went over there on this trip, and it's all tied to AI. And one of the things that came out of the trip that was very noticeable, which is relevant to the infrastructure that's being built in these AI data centers all over the United States, actually all over the world, was the fact that in China, there's an estimate of over 600 million Chinese who've adopted AI through AI adoption. This is a topic that we recently covered about a month ago regarding that being a national security threat to the United States, because AI in China is being viewed as a way to augment human activity, academia, manufacturing, and knowledge. Where in the United States, we see the opposite. We don't have as a high adoption rate because AI is often portrayed as stealing your job, the coming apocalypse, and so forth. When actually AI is nowhere near being sentient, and it's not going to take anybody's job of significance over anytime soon. And the companies that have replaced large numbers of employees with AI due to where AI is at today are hiring some of these people back because AI is not at the level that it's being sold at. So there's a lot of different factors here that are playing into this that are highly concerning. Well, one of the things that I did in my research on civil military fusion programs in China, Russia, and the United States was I started to look at the manufacturers of the infrastructure itself, the servers, the hyperscale data centers, the power generation, electric grids, the fiber backbone, the entire supply chain that it takes to manufacture and build all of this infrastructure that's going into all these data centers. And what was surprising to me was back in 2020 through 2023, 24, over 40% of the servers that were being put into the data centers were manufactured in China. That's down to 11%, but still 11% of these servers are being manufactured in China. And then the other thing that was highly surprising was the power sources associated with these data centers. It's not just getting them power. A lot of them are reliant on lithium battery backup and storage in case there's a power outage. You have to have storage, you have to have backup, you have to have redundant power systems. And over almost 60% of that infrastructure, even today, is manufactured in China.
Zooming out a bit globally, how far is that dependence? How far does that dependence on China go?
Oh, it goes even further. Globally, China is building the infrastructure for all of the global data centers, just like in the United States, but at a higher level, where we're reducing our servers down to 11% around the world. Most of those other countries are still deploying probably 80 or 90% of their servers that are being manufactured in China, along with almost 100% of the infrastructure regarding the power that is supplied and the power infrastructure needed to support these data centers. That is all being built and manufactured in China. Now, when we hear there's an AI race with China, China's already building all of this infrastructure for AI and these data centers in over 170 countries. That doesn't leave a lot of countries left for the United States to compete in. And the other issue that we're seeing as well is who is the competitor to Huawei? It used to be Nortel, and it used to be Bell Labs in the United States. But as of 2010, most of the LTE infrastructure was being built by Nortel, but then Huawei took over, and Nortel is no longer in business. And there's no equivalent to Bell Labs or Lucent in the United States to compete. So they're winning that race as well, because most of the infrastructure in these 170 plus countries is also being built by Huawei regarding LTE, which is the wireless arm to deliver AI applications and so forth. Their only real competitors are Nokia and Ericsson, who dominate in Europe and in the United States. But due to the expense of those Ericsson and Nokia 5G infrastructure, due to that, the expense of those networks, they can't compete in most of these 170 other countries that have adopted Huawei ZTE infrastructure as well.
And to watch the second part of the interview, tune in to China in Focus on Thursday. That's all for today's China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. If you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at chinainfocus@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. For on-the-clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.